Welcome again to Cottage Talk. I'm Russ Goldman. Joining me right now is journalist Jack Kelly. He's on to give us an update on the silly season. Yes, it's the silly season once again, and we're going to have a good discussion about several topics. Jack is a very well versed journalist. I want to say he's doing an excellent job, and I'm very happy to have him on the show. I just recently listened to him on the Green Pole podcast. He was just on his own X account with another YouTube channel, launching another YouTube channel, which I thought was fantastic. And I've watched him on the Jack and Joe show. I could keep going on and on, Jack, but how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Very looking forward to chatting Fulham with you.
I'm looking forward to having you on. I've been looking forward to it all day, and I really want to dive into a lot of topics. But where I actually really want to start, I want to mention that we're live on YouTube, X, and on Facebook. But if you want to listen to a podcast version, it's going to be exclusive on the Cottage Talk Patreon page. Jack has his own Patreon page. I would highly recommend subscribing to his. Please do. He does an excellent job. He interviews Marco. He is at the pressers. He is doing a phenomenal job. We need more people like Jack Kelly. So I feel very fortunate to have him on the show. Jack, before we went live, David Ornstein broke a story, and I'm actually going to share it on my desktop here. And I find this interesting. I don't know a lot about this player. You and I were talking about this earlier. Again, it's just when it comes from Ornstein, I really give it a lot of weight. So I'm just going to share this real quick, and I'll read from it. This is exclusive. Fulham pursuing deal to sign Romulo from Gostepa. I'm probably saying that wrong. FFC bid for 23-year-old striker, 16 million euros in add-ons and sell-on clause. Rejected without counter, but talks ongoing. And like I said, I just shared on the screen here. What are your thoughts about this? Like I said, you and I talked about, I don't know that much about him, but I find it interesting that Ornstein's breaking the story, which tells me there's something to it.
Yeah, I think there is something to it. Like, I can't sit here and tell you that I've watched an awful lot of him. I've not really heard of him before, which obviously doesn't really help my credentials as a journalist. But outside of England and outside of Europe, it's quite difficult to keep across everything. I know he's obviously playing in Turkey, and I believe I'm trying to get off his profile right now. I think I might have the right person. I think it is. So, 23 years old, right-footed, played 29 matches last season, scored 13, assists 9. That is a fantastic number.
Yes, I saw
that. The thing is, like, we need a third striker that's not going to be the one that is the role of Carlos Vinicius, who is basically going to come in as and when he wants to, or as and when he can, or as and when Marco sees fit to put him on. We need someone who's going to be competing with Raul Jimenez and Rodrigo Muniz, just make our strike force a little bit more potent, a little bit more dangerous, and actually just add more competition in. You know, we triggered the clause for Raul Jimenez for another year. Obviously, on paper right now, I think it's him and Muniz who are competing for the number one spot. But I think there's got to be a third striker that's going to compete with that spot as well, because Vinicius last season, apart from the last few games, didn't really have much of a say at all. And another striker who obviously is there to score goals is always going to be a benefit for Fulham.
No, I totally agree there, Jack. And what's interesting about this, like I said, I don't know a lot about him, but I do know that there is a need here for more competition. And I like the fact, and we're going to talk about Rodrigo Muniz coming up in just a couple of minutes, the fact that the two of Muniz and also Jimenez complement each other, I think competition is good. And I think, listen, I've seen a lot of Leeds supporters tell me that they're looking for another striker, so they'll let Muniz go. And that is just false. That's just not true. We know this because we follow the club. And I think, listen, and I'll ask you this outright. I don't think that they have been able to replace Mitro. They've not been able to get a replacement for Mitro. This player, I don't think would be either, but I'm not against another young striker coming in and developing him. just like they did Muniz, a Brazilian striker. I wouldn't be against a situation like this.
Absolutely. I mean, if Marcos sold him the dream of being, you know, uh, a Brazilian striker who can work with another Brazilian striker and Rodrigo Muniz, Brazilian and Portuguese, they speak the same language, so it's easy to communicate things across. There's no language barrier there. Like I say, it's difficult to sit here and talk about a player that I've never seen play before. But I did the same with Rodrigo Muniz, and Rodrigo Muniz, who, like you mentioned, obviously was in the shadow of Mitrovic,
That's
but
right.
obviously now Mitrovic has left. He's now taking on the mantle. He's now taking on that role, and he's doing a very, very good job in doing it. Leeds fans are deluded. They think that, like you say, just because we're looking for a new striker means that that means that they might sell Roger. No, it's a third striker. Every professional football team needs at least 3 strikers to compete with each other. And right now we have 2 on the books. And one in Rao, one in Rodrigo Muniz. The only way I see with us selling Muniz is if someone bids 50 million for him. Leeds have bidded 32 million. We said no, and I don't think they'll. I don't see them putting 50 million pounds on the table for Muniz. I do think that it's good that we are valuing him at that 50 million that price point, but I don't necessarily think that anyone's going to pay it now. If he has another season where he scores 10, 15 Premier League goals, then obviously that's going to be something to talk about. But at the current moment, with 1 year left on his contract, we have an option to trigger another year. So basically, it's 2 years we've got with Rodrigo in contracted. Obviously, once we trigger that option, which I'm sure we will. However, we're still trying to tie him down to a new contract as we speak, because he's one of the least paid players at the club. His wage is not as big as you would think, because obviously his contract hasn't been extended since the time he joined the club, which was when he was a very, very young kid. Now he's a big asset, and he's going to be at Fulham next season, I'm pretty sure.
I agree with that totally. And I've been just saying this outright, Jack. I'm glad that we could have a conversation about this. Why would Fulham go through the trouble of developing him and then just sell him on? It makes no sense, right? Also, I understand the price tag asking for 50 million pounds. I still wouldn't sell him. I know that's a lot of money, but you've gone through all of this to see the player really, I don't even think, reach his full potential. I want Rodrigo Muniz with Fulham Football Club for the foreseeable future. But here's the thing, and this is the thing that I do blame the club a little bit on. The amount of wages he's on is just not right. And I think a lot what's going on here is what an agent should do, trying to get a better deal for his client. I think he's trying to use these other clubs to get Fulham to a certain price point on wages. That's again my opinion. What are your thoughts about that? Do you think he could be using these other clubs?
Yeah, but that's the nature of the game. You're going to basically put the club under pressure to basically say, well, look, Leeds are after you. Tottenham are interested. Chelsea have been interested. We could so easily, Rodrigo could so easily, have his head turned. Unless you offer us competitive wages, that's not saying Rodrigo is unhappy at Fulham. That's not saying that Rodrigo wants to leave. I think he wants to be paid a fair wage. But going back to my original point, because he hasn't signed an extension since he's joined the club, there's been no opportunity for him to have a wage increase anyway. And now, obviously, we've seen 2 seasons or at least a season and a half of Muniz being a very competent Premier League striker. So he obviously deserves those wages. I think the club are very keen to put him onto a new contract, even maybe before the start of the new season, just so that he knows that he's earning that sort of money. And not that I don't think Rodrigo's a very humble guy. You saw the reaction he got when he won the Player of the Month award in the Premier League. I don't think he's driven by money, but an agent is driven by money because that is an agent's job. I'm very, very confident that Muniz is going to be sticking around for the at least foreseeable. Muniz Silva giving him the number 9 shirt is a huge.
That tells you a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. I don't think they go ahead and do that if they weren't thinking that he was going to be their long-term solution. And I just don't think that he's fully developed yet. And I think that's also a good thing. And we'll talk about a player that I think is about to really take off at the end of the show. But I think this is, again, what an agent's supposed to do to get the price up, get the most amount of money that he can for his client, which is Rodrigo Muniz. But I don't think as you said, Jack, he doesn't seem like a player that is all about the money, but the agent is. So he's trying to do what's best for his client, and I get that. But I don't think he's going anywhere. And I keep telling Leeds United supporters that, and they keep telling me what a big club they are, and I can tell them to, sorry, Jack, go screw. Anyways, well, I don't want to talk about. I don't want to talk about Leeds United. I can't stand them. Let's move on. I want to talk about a couple of other players and really get into what's going on with them. One of them is interesting, is of course Tom Kearney, and anyone that was on Fulham's X account would see what they just shared today. And you're thinking, what is going on with Tom Kearney? I've seen all the interest here. Listen, I'm here in America, Jack, and I can just tell you, and I've told you this, one thing that frustrates me, even though I watch all the episodes, is Wrexham is everywhere here. Wrexham is bigger than some Premier League clubs right now. That's how much they're marketed over here. It makes sense that they want Tom Kearney. It makes total sense. It really does. But I want him at Fulham. I want him to stay at Fulham. What do you think is going on with Tom Kearney? Tom Kearney, what's the latest you're hearing?
Well, it's very, very difficult to say. It's very, very difficult to say because right now we have until Monday, where the 30th of June, where essentially his contract's up on Monday, and then obviously you hit July, and his contract, that's it, he's done. He's a free agent. Technically, he has left the club. So unless Fulham could do something between now and Monday, then he's going to leave. I was told yesterday that the club are confident that they can get it done.
Okay.
I was told earlier tonight that there's been no progression in that, and it's all a bit. There's a phrase we use in England a lot called "squeaky bum time,"
Yep.
which basically means we're basically going to see from now until Monday whether we can actually put pen to paper. What was really interesting is that today is the day that he signed 10 years ago. It would have
Yes.
made sense for the club to be like 10 years of TC. And by the way, here's at 6 p.m. tonight or 7 p.m. tonight in the UK. Here's the new contract. He's signing a new 1-year deal. That doesn't seem to be happening. I actually was afraid the club wouldn't acknowledge it at all because of obviously the amount of comments you would get about, well, then, surely he signs a new 1-year deal now. But the club obviously did tweet it, which is great. I never doubted that they wouldn't, but I thought it would be strange if they wouldn't, and they have. So that's great. But again, it causes this controversy. It causes the comments to be like, well, hold on a second. You've acknowledged he's been here for 10 years. We didn't really get the proper goodbye that we wanted against Manchester City because we still didn't know what was going on with him. And now we're still none the wiser. It's a very, very awkward situation to be in. Usually when you see like a club legend like a Mark Noble of West Ham, I think we all knew he was leaving. The club must have announced he was leaving before the season was up so that fans could prepare themselves to say goodbye to TC or to Noble in that instance. That didn't happen with Fulham. And I think most people are like, well, surely he'll stay. I know for a fact he wants to stay. I know for a fact that Fulham and Marco Silva want him to stay. I know for a fact that the Wrexham stuff is all a bit of a smokescreen.
Okay.
I don't think there was an offer for TC from Wrexham. The initial report came out. I said it on the Green Poll yesterday. The initial report came out that there was going to be a club record fee. Well, that was impossible because he's a free transfer. So the reporting on that was, by the way, Mike McGrath is a great journalist, and he amended the tweet very, very quickly. But in terms of TC, it's a waiting game, and as the days drag on, it's going to get more and more uncomfortable, more and more uncomfortable. The last thing we want is a very awkward ending between the TC and Fulham story. They've got a few days to iron it out. I'm sure Mark is on the phone to the board saying, let's just get this done so that he's here, because he's not only is he going to be, I think, a fairly valuable asset for us next season where he can chip in. He's a club legend. He's been here for so many years, 10 years. I think he's going to get a statue. I think he should get a statue. Yeah, he should get a testimonial. And to finish just my point, I just think that I think we should just get it done. But I don't know if we're going to do it.
Well, that's the whole thing, Jack. What's interesting here is if you listen to my shows during the season, I was one that was at the beginning. Nothing against Tom Kearney. I'm a huge Tom Kearney fan, but I wanted to move on from some of our older players to get younger. I'm talking about, I mentioned Kearney, and I also mentioned Harrison Reed because I think they need to get younger. But I've had a real change when it comes to Kearney because of what he represents and what he could still offer Fulham. He could still offer Fulham a great deal. He showed it
Yeah.
all the way at the end in the Brentford match. There's still a lot left in the tank. I bring him back. Hopefully that they can get this done because, in my opinion, if they don't get it done, it's a PR nightmare, as we would say over here. It would be very bad for Fulham Football Club if he just walks away. I just think it just wouldn't look good for the club. But also, like you said, this player is going to be, if you don't think already, a Fulham legend. You don't want him to go out like that.
There is a point to be made that obviously if it hits July 1st, it doesn't automatically mean he won't be signing. You know, we saw it with the Willian situation a
Right.
couple of years ago where we were like, oh, is Willian going to sign? There was rumors of him going to Forest. What it does do is that when it hits July 1st, it just opens up the door or a can of worms where he could be like, well, he could sign for anyone at this stage, which is still the case at this stage because he could still sign for anyone because clubs can speak to players that are going out of contract anyway.
Sure.
But you know, I think it would leave. I don't. It's hard to say, but for a lot of fans, it would leave a bad taste in the mouth if they were to wait into the Julys where preseason has started, and then we're like, oh, actually, TC's going to stay another year. The fact that his contract runs out on the 30th, most people at the club, Silva, will want it resolved by now.
Yeah.
But if he does sign where his contract expires and he just signs another 1-year deal as a free agent to then Fulham again, it almost sort of separates out the spells where he had like a 10-year spell and then a 1-year spell at the club. Or I think it's 10 years and 1 year because it's 10 years today. It's really, really awkward.
Yeah.
Because of the longevity of the club, because of the status he's got. I looked back through the archives today just to find some photos to put up to TC on Twitter. And there's just so many memories, so many great moments. And it'd be a shame for it all to end with a sort of he's out of contract, therefore he's out of the club sort of thing. I'm pretty sure that they're desperate to tie him down, but I just don't know whether they're going to do it in time.
I hope they do. I'll give you an example of something that bothered me, Jack. And that's
Okay.
why if this goes bad, I'll think of this right away. I do not like the way it ended with my favorite Fulham player, Danny Murphy. Danny Murphy went to Blackburn and it didn't end well. And I think for years to come, there was some, in my opinion, bad blood between Danny Murphy and Fulham. And it's too bad that it transpired that way because for me, he will always be my Fulham captain, even though Tom Kearney's in the same breath. But if they don't get something done, I think it's going to leave a very big mark. And I hope cooler heads prevail. Both sides can come together and we have something good to talk about in regards to Kearney. I really hope that happens, my friend. Okay.
I agree.
Let's talk about another very interesting situation. I was actually on another podcast lately. They wanted to know the Toffee Bluecast all about Kenny Tete. And at that time, it looked very likely that Kenny Tete was going to Everton. He still could. And I'm still hearing that is still a very good possibility. However, since then, we've now had Fulham reportedly come back maybe with a better offer to try to keep Tete. And we were talking on this other podcast, Jack, that maybe it's coming down to the amount of years that Everton are offering compared to what Fulham are offering. It might not just be wages, it might be years. What are your thoughts about this whole situation with Tete?
I suppose it's an awkward one. July 1st, he is a free agent. Up until this point, he's contracted with Fulham, but obviously that contract runs out June 30th. Very similar to TC. What's different about the Tete situation is the fact that he has an offer from another Premier League team.
Yeah.
And basically, when the news came out, I think it might have been Saturday, Tete, it might have been Sunday. It doesn't matter. When Tete was going to Everton, I just sort of put my hands up and went, well, there we go then. That's done. I never really contemplated the option of Fulham just being a little bit more persistent and putting another contract offer on the table. Whether that's a new contract offer, maybe that's an old contract offer, but a contract was apparently sent to him, according to Fabrizio Romano, who's pretty on point when it comes to Fulham as well. So it's a deliberation, and Tete's now gone. I reckon he's probably spoke with David Moyes. He's probably been sold the project of Everton, and then Marco's been on the phone with him and gone, yeah, but you're going to be the first choice right back because Castagne's going to be behind because of his injury going into pre-season. So suddenly there's a situation where Kenny's like, I've got two very, very good offers on the table, and I don't know what to do. Do I uproot my family? Because that means moving up 3, 4 hours to Liverpool, or do I stay in London, where obviously I've had 5 years, very good years at Fulham, but previously. So it's tricky. What I'm hearing is I don't know. I think I don't know. The last I
Right.
heard, it was just the contract offers on the table from Fulham, and
Yeah.
some people have said, "Oh, I've heard he's signing with Fulham." I haven't heard that. Some people said he's signing with Everton. Again, I haven't heard it. Um,
Yeah.
Again, it's going to be one over the weekend. Is going to be quite interesting. It's very, very interesting because I've sat on a couple of spoken to a couple of Everton outlets, just sort of talking about Tete and how decent he'll be for Everton. But I mean, really, I'd rather keep him at Fulham because it saves us from spending a lot of money on or going to try and sign Bellanova for a lot of money
Right.
or Carl Walker-Peters on a free. You never know. But having a player sign a new contract at the club speaks about our ambition to losing to another mid-table Premier League team. Makes us look a little bit weaker in that position. I can understand it with the new stadium that Everton have, but as a Fulham based in London, you'd want to think we can get that one over the line.
That's a great point, Jack, because the way that I'm looking at it, I'm trying to look at it from his perspective. I think that the opportunity is actually could be very enticing. Like you said, new stadium, playing under David Moyes, very good situation for him to walk right in at Everton. They are on the rise. I truly believe Everton are on the rise. They got everything headed in the right direction. But he's with Fulham. He's been with Fulham for a long time. So I think the impetus is on Fulham to either match or beat the offer that Everton are offering, and then it's really up to Kenny, which way he wants to. Like I said, does he want to uproot his family? I mean, it's difficult. It's a difficult situation to be in. It's in some ways it's good to be wanted by another club. I mean, it's nice. I hope that Fulham's offer is right where Everton's is, and then it's on Tete for whatever he wants to do. He brought it to this point, so he holds all the cards, Jack. That's what's interesting about this. It's all on him now. It's what he wants to do, and I hope he stays at Fulham. But I don't know which one. I agree with you. I don't know which way this is going to go. I don't know why, but I actually have a strong feeling he's going to leave. I just got a feeling that he's going to leave. I could be wrong. I hope he stays because I wanted Castagna to be the starting right back last year, and while he was away, Kenny Tete took the job and kept it. And I think
Yeah,
he upped his game. He was in a contract year. I don't know if that was extra motivation, but he was phenomenal until he got injured. And I believe that he'll be great next season for 2 to 3 seasons to come. So let's hope he stays. I really, really hope so. But I'll go along with that. You mentioned a couple of other players because I've seen the rumors. Which one intrigues you the most? You mentioned Kyle Walker-Peters. The one with Bellanova, I've heard a lot about. Where do you fall on the speculation at the right back position?
I think there's one that makes sense and there's one that's ambitious, albeit it also makes sense. Bellanova would be an expensive one. It would be close to our record fee in terms of the fee we spent on Smith Rowe.
Yeah,
Um, the fee we spent on Smith Rowe. They want 40 million euros, which translates to about 35 million pounds. I reckon we could probably haggle that down, maybe 30 up front. I don't know, but because he's a wing back, it might force us to change the system, which I know we're going to talk about a little bit later.
yeah,
It would kind of make sense to get a player like Carl Walker-Peters in on a free when we've lost a player on a free.
right.
It's not quite like for like, because obviously Walker-Peters is coming off a relegation season with Southampton, which obviously lowers his confidence, but I still think there's a good player in there. When we played Southampton at St Mary's, he was the best player on the pitch, in my personal opinion.
Okay.
I think it's interesting. I think that it all sort of hinges on this Tete deal. I think if we get Tete to sign a new contract, then there's no need to go to find a new right back, in my opinion. And that money that we want to spend on Bellanova could be put to better use by going for a winger that's going to cost a bit of money as well. So interesting. One might force us to change the system, or where he could play right wing back in a 5, or
Yep.
could probably play right back in a 4. But we'll see. We will see. I think these next few days when the contract starts running down, both for TC and Tete, I think we're going to know our answers pretty quickly.
Okay. I'm going to ask you about a right back on Fulham's books that I'm pretty high on. I actually saw it 2 seasons ago when I was in Philadelphia.
Mm.
And the loan didn't work out great because I believe he got injured. But I think Devin Tanton has potential to be in the Premier League. What are your thoughts about Tanton?
I agree. I think when he came back from Chesterfield, I think once he got fit again, I saw him play with the under 21s about
Yeah.
4 or 5 times. I was impressed with it when I saw him play. I think he is one where I think I can see a pathway. What he will need next season is, let's just say, hypothetically, we have Tete and Castagna as a third right back option. I just don't see him getting enough minutes, so I think another loan will do. He's done it in League Two very, very well, so I think League One could actually probably be the next step up for him. If he was to get 46 games with a League One team, it's very much like De Figueroa's. If De Figueroa's gets 46
Yep.
games in the EFL, then you can see in the next season, 26-27, those players being integrated in the first team. You know, Tete's a year older or Castagna's a year older, and suddenly there's a pathway. These things take time. I think Tantum's very, very highly rated. I don't necessarily think he'll want to be playing in the under 21s next season, along with quite a few other under 21s players, hence like Callum Osman moving on as well. And I think this is one to watch. I think Tantum should be loaned out, but should go to pre-season in Portugal because we actually
Yeah.
don't have a fit right back right now on the
That's a good
books.
point. That's a good point. Very good talk about him, and then also Luke De Figueroa's because De Figueroa's I'm high on as well. I got to see him play,
Yeah.
and I've been arguing back and forth with a fellow friend of both of ours, Dan Crawford, where I'm thinking Luke deserves a shot now, but he makes the argument. I think I understand the argument to send him out on loan because of all the players that are in front of him. So I understand that more, but I'm very high on Luke De Figueroa's and Devin Tanton, and hopefully at some point they get their chance. I want to just mention this is from Jim. Thoughts on Romulo? Jim, we mentioned this at the top of the show. It's a player that Jack and I are really not that familiar with, but
Not at all.
it's coming from Ornstein, so there is some stuff behind it. We'll just leave it at that. There's definitely some stuff behind. I'll actually just share this to go along with it. He says, "Is Diop staying? What is going on with Diop? What happened to Diop, Jack?"
That's an interesting question because the fact of the matter is he wasn't involved in any of the match day squads
No.
but actually there's a point to be made that because we had players coming back from injury who played higher up the pitch, we don't necessarily need two centre backs on the bench every week. If you've got a fully fit squad, you know, it happened years ago when we had a fully fit squad a couple of years ago when Muniz was starting to come through that, you know, we were, you know, centre backs were missing out their place on the bench because we didn't actually need that. I think what you need is four centre backs. And I just think Diop was in that situation where Cuenca was impressing more, who was the player on the bench, the player who could play on the left side. He can play left back as well. Actually, I don't think he can play left back anyway. So yeah, I think Diop has had a really good season last season. Didn't really put much of a foot wrong. When he played at Anfield with Cuenca, he was very, very impressive. I believe that Diop will be here next season, and the four will be Bassi, Anderson, Cuenca, Diop again. I still think there's an option to upgrade on Diop. I know that's harsh to say because I think arguably he had a very good season, but I think Anderson will get better again. Diop over Anderson every time. To be fair, based on current form and what we saw back in the last season, I'd have to agree. But because of the money we spent on Anderson, I don't think we're going to be putting him on the bench anytime soon. I think he is the starter. What would interest me is if we brought in a right centre back that would challenge Anderson, but then it would actually go back on what we just talked about with De Figueroa's, who is the right side centre back coming through. I do agree with what Dan said. I think that he is going to get a loan. That's also true as well, going to back five. I just think that us in the back five is just a bit stodgy, and I think we'd have to have a Bellanova and then Robinson on the other side just to give us some flying wing backs. But yeah, the Figueroa's thing is, I think he's going to stay, sign a new contract, and get loaned out, which I think will benefit him in the long run because he's had that experience in the first team under Silva. So Silva's very aware of him and what he can do.
Good stuff there, Jack. All right. Okay, for the second half of the show, I now am going to go with a place we call Cottage Talking Points, which is just things I'm thinking about and I want to get your thoughts on for the upcoming season. And again, major thank you for you to joining me. We can really talk about these topics. So let's start with this one. This one's huge, and my friend Steve Reynolds already commented he's got some strong feelings when it comes to this player. So let's talk about it. What are your expectations for Emil Smith-Rowe this season? So I've talked about this a great deal. My co-host Tony Gold has said this many times. This is the season for Emil Smith-Rowe. But I do want to mention this. I noticed during the season, basically he just was consistently inconsistent. Certain matches he flashed, and I think against better teams, he really struggled to really impact. And I think part of that has to do with the style of play where Fulham just don't have the ball enough. So what are your thoughts about Emil Smith-Rowe for this season? I've already seen pictures of him trying to get into shape, which is a good thing. Same thing with Ryan Sessegnon. I mean, these are positive pictures we're seeing from both of these players. But let's start with Emil Smith-Rowe because based on the picture I saw, I think he's putting in some work here.
And that's encouraging. I think Silva at the end of the season must have said to him, you didn't complete a 90 minutes last season. For a record signing, that's got to change. I think it can be forgiven. Sorry, every time I get a notification on my phone, I have to quickly look down just in case it is Fulham. It's not.
Right.
But I think that I can forgive him for having, I wouldn't even say an underwhelming season, but just a difficult season last campaign because of the lack of sharpness, because of the time in which he joined the club, because of the season he had previous. But now, next season, I don't want to be cutthroat about it, but there are no excuses. And the picture that we've all seen on his Instagram story is incredibly encouraging. It basically means he's putting in the work before preseason to get himself fit, then going to preseason, doing those hard yards to a point where next season, the first question I'm going to ask to Smith-Rowe, the first question I'm going to ask to Silva at the press conference or out in Portugal is, do you think Smith-Rowe is ready to play 90 minutes for Fulham? And the answer is obviously going to be yes, because he's putting in that work now. He's had a season where he's been bedded in. And what we want to see from Smith-Rowe, because there's no doubt that his technical ability on the ball is impeccable, the way he links up, but he's got to be stronger on the ball and he's got to take more risks in the final third. Instead of receiving the ball and looking for the easy pass backwards or sideways, he's got to turn, like he did against Everton to set up Iwobi, drive into space, use the strength to hold off defenders, link with the players around him, and obviously get shots off as well. Because we saw that against Newcastle, his goal against Newcastle.
That's right.
We saw it against Everton with the goal he set up for Iwobi. So we can do it. We just need to see it on a more consistent basis. Because the back end of last season, he was so lightweight on the ball. Very lightweight. If he gets stronger in terms of his upper body strength, that's going to help him. If he gets fitter, which means he can complete more minutes on the pitch, that's going to help him because fans will get off his back. I understand the pressure of being the record signing. The demand is there. And I think next season we're going to see more from him. If we don't, then obviously there's a conversation to be had.
Okay, so working off that, I want to talk about, I think, some of the things that Pereira offers. I think he wants Smith-Rowe to offer that's off the ball, where the pressing. I think the pressing is something that Silva really wants from that position with Pereira, and he does it very well. Smith-Rowe, I noticed, was amping that up as the season went, Jack. I think that's also part of what Silva wants from him. But I want to throw another player into the mix because Josh King can play that role too, but he seems to be better when, he doesn't seem to need players to create for him. He can do it by himself. Smith-Rowe seems like he needs his teammates to get him the service. What are your thoughts about those two different players playing the number 10 role, and maybe Josh King can vie for that position along with Smith-Rowe?
I think that's what ultimately I want to happen.
Okay.
King came on against Brentford and basically played like he had no fear. And
no fear at all.
Playing when you have no fear means the pressure's not on you, which means you can basically. And I think if he plays more minutes, then he'll maybe start to feel a bit more pressure. But the initial sort of burst onto the scene where he's playing in this free role, where he's basically got. If that's about Smith-Rowe, I can understand it. I can understand that point about Smith-Rowe. I think he does want it. He's putting in the work in pre-season.
Yep.
But in terms of Josh, he's got no pressure on his shoulders right now. He's playing with a freedom. And the way in which he played against Brentford, opening up the space, making that run to open up the space for Wilson to score. Like those goals don't happen at Brentford, the TC header, the Wilson winner, without
Without
Josh King's
Josh
very, very
King,
hard work
exactly, Jack.
off the ball and on the ball, setting up Tete's cross, off the ball, making that run, the decoy run to open up the space. He's an incredibly intelligent player. He's probably the best talent we've had at the club since Fabio Carvalho. And I'm so excited. He's got 1 year left on his deal. I know they're talking. I know they're talking about a new contract. I hope we get there because it's going to be a phenomenal. He's going to be a phenomenal talent. I don't think Pereira is going to be here next season.
Okay.
Just based on what I've heard, there's obviously been a bit of a, he had a bit of a bust up with Silva about the around the Tottenham game where he was dropped from the squad completely.
Yep.
Silva obviously was very careful in the media what he actually said because of obviously what Pereira sort of said in that sort of interview he did, which basically said that I think it was something like he wanted to leave or he was open to leaving. That's obviously not going to impress Silva halfway through a season. I think it's got to the stage now where I think Pereira, with Smith Rowe coming through, Pereira is going to want to be at a club where he's guaranteed the minutes to get him into the Brazil squad for the World Cup. Whether that's going to be with Fulham, I'm not sure. With Josh King coming through and putting pressure on him.
Yeah.
What an exciting position that's going to be next season. Not only Josh King, but obviously Harry Wilson in the 10, who's been brilliant for Wales.
He could play that role too.
It's great. It's fantastic.
That's a great point. And we're talking about, like I said, this conversation began talking about Emile Smith-Rowe, but really it's about the number 10 position, Jack, because I think this is where Fulham can take it to the next level. They need someone dominant in that role. This is something that Tony Gold has talked to me about on Cottage Talk, is that we need a player that is going to be dynamic in that role and score goals. That's what we're missing from Pereira. We got a little bit from Smith-Rowe, but you just talked about Harry Wilson and Josh King. They need a dominant player as the number 10.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think that you're right, because Pereira's off the ball presence, if he leaves the club, I reckon 2, 3, 4 games into the season, people are going to say, oh, whisper it quietly, but we're missing Pereira's off the ball pressing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Unless obviously Smith Rowe can then take the mantle on, where we press in a 4-4-2. So basically we have the striker and we have the 10 sort of going together to create that sort of press. And if Smith Rowe or Josh King has the has the energy to do that, then I don't think anyone's going to say anything. But if there's a game where someone's slightly off the pace, we lose a game, you can understand the reaction. You can then analyze the game from an off the ball sort of perspective and say, this is where Pereira puts in the hard yards, and actually this is where he's most underappreciated and most appreciated by Silva. I think that Pereira's time at Fulham is probably up.
I think so too.
But we'll see. And if that does happen, then fans are going to get excited because they're going to think, okay, Josh King, who also can play in the number 8 position,
that's right,
play in the number 10 position. The options are going to open up, and I really want Smith Rowe to do well next season.
So do I.
I'm his biggest fan. I really want him to do well, and I think he will because he's put in that work. If I get the opportunity to speak to him in pre-season, I'm going to say, look, we saw you on Instagram. We saw the work you're putting in. How are you feeling? Are you feeling fit? And obviously, Smith Rowe is one of the most asked about players when it comes to press conferences as well, because of the Arsenal, the Hale End, the money that we spent on him.
Yep.
So much to be excited about, but so much to be cautious about as well with Fulham.
Totally agree, Jack. Very good stuff. That's why I'm glad I could have you on, could really have a conversation to really get into what we're looking for the upcoming season. And this is another topic. We've already kind of talked a little bit about it. I heard you and Dan talk a little bit about it. Tony and I have talked about it as well. Could there be a little bit of a shift to seeing more formation with 3 center backs? Now, you already mentioned this. I think it does have its advantages, but it has its disadvantages if you don't have really excellent wing backs, wing backs that are really dynamic. And maybe that's why Bellanova is being thought upon. And if Marco wants to play more of this formation, what are your thoughts about this? Do you think we might see it more frequently?
Well, another player who could play in a back five in a wing back position is Kyle Walker-Peters as well. We did it with
that's true. Yep.
Last season. So I don't think that it's difficult. So the times we went to a back five in the season was when we needed to rest some players. There was a lot of fixtures congested, and we would just change up the system. Wolves midweek, Chelsea Boxing Day, a couple of home games in there as well. just to experiment. It worked some of the time. It didn't work all the time. But I think that there's definitely a case for it to be a plan next season because we have players who can do it. I think that I think the way that Tete plays, he can play in a 5. I think that's fine.
Okay.
We've seen the fact of the matter is that essentially when we play a 4 in our build-up, he tucks in as a third centre back anyway.
That's right.
And then we have a Dharma Traore or Wilson or whoever on the right-hand side really pushed up. Obviously, the Bellanova situation is going to be interesting. Like, if we actually do pursue that, then there is going to be a question of, okay, well, this is quite serious now. You have Robinson on one side, Bellanova on the other. They are flying fullbacks. So suddenly maybe we were going to be predominantly be playing a 5 instead of a 4 all season. The amount of money that we are quoted to be spending or Atalanta want for Bellanova. But obviously then it leaves us a midfielder short or a forward player short. So it's striking that balance. I think that we can do, I mean, obviously Anderson suits a back 5 better for sure.
Well, that's where I was going on this.
Yeah.
Because I think he would shine in that formation, but are you then not going to be as dynamic going forward? I think that give and take is something that bothers me, Jack, because I could see it against certain opponents. It can work, but other opponents, I don't think that you should be playing this each and every week in the Premier League. I just don't think it. I don't think it gives Fulham enough chance to win matches. I think it helps them not lose matches and let them nick matches. But when they're going, but I want them to be basically taken to certain opponents, and I don't think that's the right formation at times, Jack.
But we're in a very competitive Premier League climate right now where anyone could be. I mean, anyone has always always had. I can't speak. Anyone could beat anyone in the Premier League. However, certain opponents lend ourselves to set up a different way in ways to exploit them. And if we do go to a 5 at some point in this season, I think Diop's okay to play in a 5. Anderson, Bassi, I'm sure is fine. Cuenca, these players have all been trained to play 2 different systems. I hopefully predominantly think that when we're at home against teams, even the top teams, you stick to a 4. And I do think I think it'll be basically the same as last season, where if a game gets congested, and that's taking away if we don't sign Bellanova. If a fixture is getting congested in the December time, midweek fixtures, that's the time to sort of switch it up a little bit. But I do agree. I thought we were really stiff in a 5. I've said that for a while now. We won a couple of games, but against Wolves, we were backs against the wall. As soon as we made it 2-1, we were defending and trying to hit them on the break. We should have scored another goal on the break. We didn't. Against Chelsea, it was much more open, and we managed to hit them and score in the last minute, which was incredible. But I think a 4 is what Silva likes. 4-2-3-1 is his formation, is his system, and it's why we're doing so well, since he's been in the club.
I totally agree. That should be the main formation, but coming up at Stamford Bridge, I wouldn't be against if they do it again. And then Rodrigo Muniz wins the game again. I'm all for that. I'm all for it if it played out like that again. All right, Jack, I do have a question from my friend Chris Goodwin, who's actually a Liverpool supporter, but does support the show, which is nice. So he says, does Jack think Fulham will try to bring back João Palhinha? Here we go, Jack. What are your thoughts?
I think we're going to try. I just don't think it's going to necessarily happen. I think there's a lot of moving parts to this. You can think about, well, essentially, we're not going to buy him. We're not going to buy him from Bayern because it would just be too much. The budget would be blown. If we could look at an option to buy with a loan with an option to buy, suddenly, an extra year of TV revenues in, the budget can be a little bit bigger. And then his price probably comes down after a year as well because he's a year older. The main standpoint is that João Palhinha needs to be in the spotlight ahead of the World Cup. This essentially is probably going to be his last World Cup.
That's right.
Before he retires because of his age. Probably could play in 1 more Euros, I reckon. But this is it. He will see this as his big opportunity. The fact of the matter is, the last year at Bayern has been an utter disaster, both on and off the pitch for João Palhinha. Wow. Last week, I was aware that we are quite keen on this. I haven't really heard anything since. I think it's probably a priority, not a priority sort of deal. I know Silva's really keen for it, but I think that Man United can't afford him for sure. Any other club that want to get him probably can't afford him in terms of the fact that they'll want to sign other players, especially Man United. That's the main sort of. I think that if João Pelini is looking for a move, and he's open to a move, whether it be a loan. I think if there's a queue of teams wanting to sign him, I think Fulham are at the front of the queue
I
because
agree with that.
he's coming back to a club where he's absolutely adored. No one really begrudged him the move to Bayern Munich. Silva loves him. He knows the club. He knows the system. He could tuck into our midfield very, very easily. It's going to be tricky. I don't necessarily happening right now, but you never know. You never know.
Okay, I'm going to throw this one out because Steve brought it up to us. Let's talk about Harvey Elliott.
Yeah, I don't think there's any substance to this whatsoever. I think that he has been linked with a move away, and it sort of seems like the sort of club that he would move to: the Fulhams, the Brightons, the West Hams, perhaps. I know Brighton have been heavily linked. If they lose Matt O'Reilly, I know they're not quite the same position, but there's some money to spend there for Brighton, who've already spent quite big this summer already. I think this is a complete non-starter, and that's not to do with the relationship he has with the club. I just don't think. I think we'll be like, we could see if we can try and inquire about him. I just don't think we're going to sign him. Essentially, I thought the initial source that reported it, I don't necessarily think is the strong source. I think that I would believe he'd probably be on a short list for players we want to sign in that sort of position. I just don't think it's going to happen. You know, he has been booed every time he's played against Fulham since he's left. I think he's matured. I think that Fulham fans should probably themselves mature about Harvey Elliott. And I think if he came back, it'd be interesting. I just don't see it happening.
Okay, very good. All right. Jack, let's talk about the academy.
Okay.
What are your thoughts about the pathway? Will we see a better pathway?
It's really difficult. We have one of the best academies in England in terms of what we produce. The issue we have is tying these players down to long-term contracts. Everyone knows the players that we've lost on frees or for very little money who have gone on to do amazing things. Harvey Elliott just being one of them. Matt O'Reilly, Fabio Carvalho, Mr. Dembele. The list goes on and on and on. And essentially, we're getting a reputation for, that guy, even Mika Bareth, who was in the Fulham Academy, went to Arsenal and now is killing it at Monaco. You know, we are now known as a team that has, a very good academy, but do they bring many players through? Not really. Obviously, Carvalho being one of them because he had a season with us in the Championship. But you'd like to think that Josh King, Martial Godot, Luke de Fougerolles, Devin Tanter were the next ones to come through. Charlie Robinson, perhaps.
Right.
If he hadn't got such a bad injury, he might be near the first team now. But these players need loans. They need their contracts extended so that they have their secure future at the club and then make them a sellable asset if we do end up selling them. The academy is fantastic. It's just the way that I think Silva. I see a lot of comments saying Silva doesn't like playing young players. Godot and King were in and around the first team the whole season.
Right.
And you can't bring everyone through because you've only got a certain amount of players. You need your experience. You also do need your youth. And I think 2 players coming through and performing and playing for the first team is enough in one season, in a season where you essentially need to survive in the Premier League. We obviously were going for different targets.
Sure.
But this whole thing about Silva doesn't like playing youth, I think is a bit of a myth because I think he wants to, and I think he's managed King and Godot's minutes very, very well this season. The obvious shame is Callum Osmond, who's leaving on a free.
Yeah,
but I think he's got Champions League football. He could be playing next season, and he's got Brendan Rodgers wants to play him in the first team. It's a no-brainer.
No, I agree with that. And listen, I just want to see more of a clear pathway. I know what you're saying. He has played them, but he's played them sparingly. I think they've been very careful. And I just hope that we see more time from Josh King. I'm going to use him as the example, Jack, because I think he's ready to flourish. And I think you'll agree with me on that.
Yeah. We spoke about him earlier. If King puts pen to paper, if he was to put pen to paper and sign a contract before the season started or between now and the end of next season, there'll be street parties in SW6 because he'd be a player who, as the weeks will tick on as it stands, everyone's going to say his contract's up. He's like one of the best players. Everyone's sniffing after him. If he was to sign a contract at Fulham, then there'd be that comfort of, okay, well, teams can come in for Josh King next summer and try and sign him, but there's going to be a big fee on his head because he's under contract. I think that Josh King, who is a boyhood Fulham fan, I live 5 minutes
Yep.
away from his family home.
Oh,
Not that has any relevance, but I really think that Jay Stansfield. I really think he's going to stay. I think he's going to sign a new contract. The issue is Silva and the lack of us as a club to use them worryingly. Osman, Stano, Ridgen.
yeah,
Look, the Ridgen one is. I saw a report last week saying that clubs are sniffing around him. Well, he
yep.
needs to sign a scholarship first before anyone can sort of come in for him.
That's what I thought.
If he signs a scholarship, which will probably be a 2-year scholarship, then he's got 2 years at the club before anything else can happen. Then if he signs a pro deal, if he signs a 3-year pro deal, then he's under contract. So I don't think clubs can come sniffing about him at this stage if he signs a scholarship. I believe he's going to sign that scholarship and going to be with the under 21s.
Okay. Final comment from our friend Chris, who's a Liverpool supporter. Could there be an argument that Marco is too careful when it comes to the academy players?
Yeah, I think protecting players from injury, from exposure. I think all the way back to when Sessegnon was on a hat-trick at St James's Park and we got a penalty. And Savisa went, "You're not taking that because you'll get all the headlines and we might lose you. So Tim Ream, you'll take it. We're already 3-1
I
up,
remember that. Oh,
and we missed the pen.
yeah, I
And
remember that.
Sessegnon stayed for another season. Who would have known if the young kid who scores, a 17-year-old who scores a hat-trick at the championship favourites in Newcastle United that season would have broke the internet. Alas, he only scored 2. I think there's definitely he can be careful. I'd rather he be too careful than too erratic.
Okay.
If he played him too much and he got injured, and you look at Arsenal, you look at Bukayo Saka, how many minutes has he played across his very young career? How many injuries has he got? It's a good point. And you're not playing in the Championship. You're playing in the Premier League, where it's the fastest league, the most demanding league in the world. And that's why Carvalho could get away with playing so many minutes when he was with us in the Championship, because it was just a lesser opposition. And he did so well. I think King, albeit should be part of the first team next season and will be the part of the first team next season, I think that he should be, again, careful with how many minutes he plays, because you don't want him to wear out. He's only 18. He's only 18.
It's actually a fair argument on your part, Jack, to talk about that, because now we're going to talk about a player that was a boy when he was with us. He's now a man. Let's talk about Ryan Sessegnon, because I want to end the show talking about here, because I've made the call and I'm going to make it right now. That preseason right now, before the season begins, my player of the season, I'm projecting Ryan Sessegnon. I'm saying it right now because I truly believe, not that they're building around Sessegnon, it's just that now he is a man. He has the confidence. We always knew this, Jack. You talk about the hat trick, right? You're talking about how he played in the Championship. He always had the ability. And the one thing that it's his footballing sense around the goal. He knows how to score goals. He's always at the right place at the right time. He's ready to take off. And I'm just telling you, I expect big things, a huge impact from Sessegnon. I see him as a winger. That's where I see him. What are your thoughts about Sessegnon? Am I crazy to go with Sessegnon?
I don't think you are crazy. I think that he is now seen as more of a winger. The impact that he made, it's against Liverpool and Tottenham. Like, came off the bench against Tottenham, but I think he's a fine left back. I think he's fine at left back. But the fox in the box, who we've seen, that goal against Liverpool was so reminiscent of the goal he scored, down the years when he was a 17-year-old kid at Fulham, playing higher up the pitch. The fact he can now play on the right-hand side as well as the left. I love how versatile all these players are. Iwobi, Sessegnon, just all these players. Zinchenko, obviously linked with the club. He can play left back, centre mid. Bobby Deacordova-Reid, who could play all over the pitch as well. I love it. I absolutely adore Ryan Sessegnon. The club absolutely love him. The fans absolutely love him. And if he's seen as a winger to compete with Wilson and Adama Traore next season, then he'll get plenty of minutes, plenty of assists, because he always knows where to be. Technically on the ball, he's not the best player in the world. He's not a Lionel Messi on the ball, but his spatial awareness, his positional awareness is actually some of the best I've ever seen at the club, because he always just finds himself in the right place. whether he scores or misses, he's in those positions.
That's right.
You know, sometimes you have chances and you go, well, where was so and so in the box for that chance? When Sessegnon scores, you're like, well, how did he end up there? Because it's usually like he just comes out of nowhere. Obviously, playing a higher up the pitch, you'd expect him to be in those positions. But there are times where you're just like, where has he come from? And the goal against Everton, Liverpool was so well taken, such a cultured finish. And I agree. I don't agree that he's going to be player of the season, but I think he'll be in the top three. I think he'll be definitely top three.
Okay. Okay, very good. I just expect good things from him. And you know what's great about him is he really showed how much he loves Fulham. And I'll give you the game, and you're going to agree with me on this. The Tottenham game, the goal, the way he
Yeah.
handled that, Jack, I thought was class.
Oh, it was such a good goal. And you say the way he handled it in terms of the finish, but then
No, I'm talking about everything.
the non-celebration, to not
Yes,
celebrate, you know, to have that respect.
to
That was
have
his
the
first goal
respect.
in front of the Hammersmith end
That's right.
since 2018. Since Boxing Day 2018. You'd have thought to make it 2-0, it would have been shirt off, but he went, no, it's my former team. I'm not going to react. And it made the celebration look a little bit, as the kids would say, colder. It made it look colder. It made it look more cool. It made him look more composed, like he
That's
had a
what I
bit of
mean.
aura about him. And that is, honestly, I'm seeing, players posting on their Instagram, some are on holiday, some are still, I reckon probably now they're still getting back to fitness ahead of preseason. Sessegnon's putting stuff up on his story every day, and every day he's looking fitter, stronger. We were talking about Smith Rowe earlier.
No,
Sessegnon's been the most impressive player for me on social media.
that's great.
Yeah, it's
That's
pretty
great.
encouraging.
It's very encouraging. Like I said, what's great about him is, like you said, right place, right time. He's always there. And that to me, I think that was one of his best attributes. He's showing it again, and he's entering his prime, Jack. That's what's great about this. His prime is back with Fulham.
Yeah.
You know, I blame Tottenham. I blame Tottenham a lot for this. I know injuries are injuries, but the way that he was treated at Tottenham, I thought was extremely poor. I followed it all on social media. The supporters were on top of him left and right. Now he's back where he's loved it, and he can thrive. And I expect big things from Ryan Sessegnon. I think that's also a great place to end the show because it's about Fulham. The show's about Fulham, and this is a Fulham player, my friend. Jack, listen, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I've really enjoyed it. I've had you on for almost an hour. Thank you very much, my friend. I hope you enjoyed it.
Well, I feel like we're going to win the Premier League after this chat.
I'm a pretty emotional guy, if you haven't noticed. I'm a pretty positive guy. So, but listen, what's interesting here, if I remember correctly, because again, Jack does the Jack and Joe show, and you've been on Fulhamish many times. I think you were starting to talk Champions League during the season. I predicted 7th last season, by the way. So we're both optimistic.
I think there was a chat. I was on Fulhamish, and there was a chat about Fulham. I think we beat Brighton in the first season back, and I was talking about the odds of being in the Champions League. Look, it's fun. I know I have a little phrase, what's the point of being alive if you can't dream? But I think that was all. It was all fun and games. It sort of fell flat when obviously we finished 11th last season and didn't qualify for Europe. But it's fun to be excited. It's fun to get excited as a club that hasn't won a major honour, which Everton fans love to remind us earlier this week. It's fun to be excited. I don't like. I wouldn't want to support a team that wins all the time because it's boring. I want to support a team where sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe not so good, and because that is what football's all about. That's right. I think we under Marco Silva have had such a great ride, and the fact he's staying for another season at least, hopefully he signs a new contract as well. Yep. I think we're in for a fun season, and with shouts like Sessegnon for Player of the Season, we're going to see a lot of he's one of our own. He's one of our own. It's going to be fantastic, and I can't wait to go to the Amex for the first game.
That's great, Jack. Listen, tell everyone how that they can follow you. I'm sure they already know, and also on Patreon.
Yeah, look, Patreon is obviously something I set up, almost this time last year. It was a big risk to leave my full-time job to go solo. £5 a month is all I charge, or $6 if you're in the US. You get loads of Fulham content, including press conferences, interviews with players, under 21 players, first team players, Marco Silva, and I'm 1 year in. I want to get bigger. I want to get better. There's a massive American audience for Fulham, and I think they'd all benefit from subscribing because you genuinely feel like you're a little bit more in touch with what's going on at Fulham. So yeah, it doesn't cost a lot at all. What would cost a fiver a month is basically a pint of beer at a pub that you should be paying in a one-time payment. The money doesn't come out your account on an annual basis. It's a monthly basis, £5, and it really would help me on my career. I'm trying to get to a certain number before the season starts. I'm almost there. I want to push it even further. I've got an overall target I want to hit. It's a business. It's going to take time, but the support has been unbelievable. Last week or so, it's been unbelievable. And I know you've got a Patreon as well. It's well worth subscribing to both.
Oh, thank you, Jack. I appreciate it. And please do subscribe to Jack's. He does a phenomenal job. We need people covering the club, and he does an excellent job. He's the one talking to Marco Silva. He's the one doing videos before the games, press conferences. He's there. Support Jack on his Patreon. Please do. And also support Cottage Talk on Patreon as well. I would really appreciate that. Okay. And Jack, I hope you come back soon. I would love to have you back on soon.
I'll be brilliant. Let's do it before the season starts.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. He's Jack Kelly. I'm Russ Goldman. Thank you as always for watching and listening to Cottage Talk.